And hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Chapters here on Armstrong Cable. Chapters is the television show that profiles local authors, editors, and publishers in our community. I'm Eliot Parker, and it's great to have you with us. On this episode of Chapters, we're going to be talking about the genre of drama, and more specifically, playwriting. And we're pleased to have playwright Jonathan Joy with us today. And Jonathan Joy is the author of 25 plays, including The Princess of Rome, Ohio, American Standard, and the Bitsy and Boots series, and over a dozen one-acts that are regularly produced. His work has been staged in 12 United States, from countless productions in his home state of West Virginia to off-Broadway and off-Broadway stages in New York City and overseas in France and Dubai. Publications and features include the New York Times, Smith & Krauss, Brooklyn Publishers, Southern Theater Magazine, Insight for Playwrights, and One Act Play Depot in Canada, plus many more. He's won several regional writing awards and is the only two-time winner of the National Write Like Mammoth Award, sponsored by the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, and he won those awards in 2005 and 2008. His books have topped the Amazon charts in theater, drama, political humor, and Christian literature categories. And John is an English and writing professor at Ashland Community and Technical College in Ashland, Kentucky, where he has been nominated for Teaching Excellence Awards for 5 straight years. And we're delighted to have a very talented playwright with us today to talk about the genre of drama and playwriting. John, welcome to Chapters. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit first, for our audience who may not be familiar with drama and playwriting. What is that genre of drama, and how does playwriting fit into that genre?
Well, drama is a story that is created to be performed on stage and in front of an audience, and playwriting, the playwright is at the center of that because he or she has to create the conflict, the characters that will be acted out for the audience.
And when we talk about playwriting, a lot of people don't realize, because maybe they've seen a play, they've seen a production somewhere along the way, but there actually is writing involved. And you mentioned the playwright being at the center of the genre. You know, there is words, there is language that has to be used. Can you tell us a little bit about that process of how that works, how writing, and how you use typical writing strategies to create a play?
That's true. Well, yeah, without the playwright, we don't have any story, right? When we go see a play, we see the actors on stage and we think about the technical elements involved, but the writer is central to that. And I was involved in theater for long before I started writing. I was involved as an actor and director, and kind of found my way to writing eventually after 10 years of being involved in it to some extent. And I found that once I got engaged in actually creating the characters and the stories, that I was more in tune with that part of it, with the writing part of it. And to this day, that's been 10 years ago, I still enjoy the writing more so. And now I can sit back and relax and watch someone else perform it on a stage, and I don't have to get nervous about it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you, too, about some playwrights that have influenced you. You mentioned that you got your start acting and directing yourself before you shifted over into being the playwright. Who are some playwrights that have influenced you, or some playwrights that you still look at today and say, this is the kind of work I want to try to aspire to write?
I think, Shakespeare, honestly, obviously, I think any playwright would probably lump him in there at some point because his plays are so timeless and can be related to any period. But I think Tennessee Williams has always been my favorite because he writes such great, rich Southern characters, and characters that I can relate to some extent, and really interesting conflicts. I've always liked him. I've always liked Eugene O'Neill. There's Lady Gregory is one that I really like from the early Irish theater. Lady Gregory and William Butler Yeats have always been two of my favorites. And Irish writers in general, I think the last 100 years, the best plays that have been written have come out of Ireland. And so a lot of my favorites kind of go back to Ireland, from Lady Gregory, who wrote really, really funny short plays, which is what I try to do. And to Brian Friel, who writes, more serious plays about memory and looking back on your life. Those two are up there as well. Lady Gregory and Brian Friel I've read a lot, and I think they've influenced my work probably more than anyone. Tennessee Williams would be up there too. And I've always enjoyed Woody Allen too, for sheer comic purposes.
And I know you and I have talked about this many times. Woody Allen has one of my favorite quotes about life. 90% of life is showing up.
It is.
And,
and I've shared that with my students on many occasions.
Absolutely.
It's a great quote.
And when you think about playwriting and theater, that's certainly an aspect of it.
Oh,
You know,
it is. Yeah.
What you do on the stage, what goes on the stage is showing up. What goes on between, the director, the writer, the producer, the tech crew, the set designers, everything, makeup artists, costumes, everything's about showing up.
It is. There's something to be said for just being there in that world and being aware, and yeah, absolutely.
So let me ask you a little bit about your writing process. When you get an idea for a play, where do you find those ideas coming from, and what's your writing process like from the time you get an idea and you decide, I want to write this play, or I'm going to write a 1-act play, 2-act play, 3-act play about this? How do you get the idea? Where does it come from, and what's your process like to get that idea or those thoughts and those characters down on paper?
And sometimes, I don't know, I feel like I always have ideas for something. Sometimes it might be a piece of a conversation you overhear, or it's often something that's happened to me, but I try to change it to make it funnier or more dramatic. But it seems like there's always inspiration for stories everywhere. I always tell my students, everybody has a story to tell, but not everybody takes the time to actually put it down on paper. And whether that story is something that's happened to you or whether it's something you observe, I've got tons of ideas. The problem is getting the time to put them down on paper and working them through that process. Typically, I've worked a couple different ways depending on the play. Sometimes I will sit down once I have a couple of different characters, and I will write them together, just hanging out what they would say to each other. And that's advice that comes from Edward Albee, who's another playwright that's inspired me. I saw an interview with him, and he said, if you have interesting characters, they'll take you interesting places. So if you put them in a situation where they're hanging out, talking, eventually something interesting will happen, and that's your conflict. That's the beginning of your play, and you might end up tossing the 10 or 12 or 20 pages that led up to that. So I do that. I hang out with them. I get to know them. I write dialogue, them speaking back and forth to each other, and let the story come to me through them. That's a very stream of consciousness way of working. Sometimes it's the opposite way. I'll have an idea for a story, and I'll write toward that story, but I don't know the characters as well from the beginning. And in other times I have worked in a more detailed way where I'll actually outline something scene by scene. With American Standard, which you'd mentioned, with that, I had an outline from beginning to end of every scene, what I wanted to happen, so I knew where I was going with it. And then I went back and filled in the dialogue. But that's much more organized way than I typically go at it. Typically I'll know, a couple of characters, and I'll just dive right in and see where they lead me.
What do you find are some of the challenges to being a playwright, or to going through this process that you just described about playwriting?
I think the main challenge is it's meant to be on a stage, and you don't always have that at your disposal. The work is ultimately meant to be performed so you can get that audience response and you can know what works and what doesn't. And I've been fortunate in this area to have connections with a number of different theaters that are willing to put my work on stage. A lot of playwrights don't have that, and even a lot of my stuff, I find myself struggling to find somebody that will put it on stage, and to some extent it's incomplete until it's done, until it's finished and up on the stage. So you need collaborators, you need the actors and the directors, you need a stage, a space, something, and without that, you can't quite finish, because you need that. You need to at least hear it with actors, preferably see it performed on a stage. And a lot of playwrights, I think most playwrights don't have that immediately available to do. So.
I wanted to ask you also about some of your plays, because you've had some of them, as we mentioned a moment ago, that have been performed not only on Broadway stages in New York City, places like France, Dubai. How did that process happen from the time you wrote the play till the time it got accepted and performed? And did you get a chance to go to any of those places, those cities, and see it performed live?
I've been to some. I don't usually make those trips, but I've been to New York once to see a production of Simply Selma. I was involved in that production. And I've been to Columbus as well, but I don't often get to see where they are produced if they're outside of this area. Often theaters will record them and send me videos so I can see what it looked like and how an audience responded, or they'll send me pictures. But it is pretty incredible to be able to go somewhere else and see it performed, especially since I write, so much of the humor that I write is kind of locally based, and so if there's a joke about Tudor's Biscuit World or the Coach's Inn, I know people will get it and laugh. But you take it somewhere else, even just Charleston, but you take it to Columbus or New York and you wonder, okay, are people going to laugh at that at all? Are they going to get any of the references? And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. But even I've taken a lot of shows to Charleston, and even just that 1 hour, an audience reacts in completely different ways from Huntington to Charleston, and it's neat to see that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So how did those plays get there? I mean, I know you write the plays, and I know like most authors, you probably copyright that work
Yeah.
and put it in your name. But how did it get to New York? Was it a situation of where someone just found your play and looked at it? Was it a connection that you had? How did those plays get from you to those theater houses in New York, Columbus, and elsewhere?
Usually, I'll submit plays constantly to just about any theater that will take them. There's a blog. It's New York City Playwrights, NYC Playwrights. It's probably the best, most comprehensive website out there for playwriting opportunities. And it's not just New York City. There's theaters from all over the country that will send their information to NYC Playwrights and about what kind of plays they're looking for to perform. So I'll go there once a month and look for opportunities where I can send my plays. And I'll send stuff out constantly. And I'll send 10, 15 plays out and maybe hear back from one company, somewhere in Idaho or New York or Virginia that is interested in performing that play. That's typically how it works. Now, I have some of my stuff published, so occasionally you'll get somebody who will find it and read it and want to produce it, and that's happening more and more, but still most of my productions come from the work that I submit to theaters that are looking for new work.
So it sounds like the process is very similar to what writers go through when they query an agent,
Right.
query a publishing house. You send 10 or 15 query letters or 10 or 15 first, second, third chapters of a book
Yeah.
to an agent or a publisher, and most of the time you don't hear anything back,
true.
or you get a nice rejection letter, but you
Yeah.
do occasionally get that one that says, yes, I'd like to see more. So it sounds like the process pretty similar there.
I think it's the same. I think it's very much the same. You're looking for, instead of that one agent or publisher, you're looking for that one theater that sees something in your work and wants to produce it.
Let's talk a little bit now about some of your plays, and I know you brought one copy that we'll put up on the screen here for our audience, The Princess of Rome, Ohio, one of my favorite plays that you've written, and then I want to get into the Bitsy and Boots series because that's my all-time favorite.
Yeah.
But talk to us a little bit about the Princess of Rome, Ohio. What is that play about, and where did your inspiration for what goes on in that play come from?
This is, Princess was created about 10 years ago now, I think, or I started on it maybe 11 years ago. It's what I would call a front porch comedy, which means all of the action of the play takes place on the front porch of the Adkins household in this case. And I have several plays that would fit into that genre. And what we see is a day in the life, eventually week in the life, month in the life of this family as they act out many of their drama and dysfunction on the front porch for all of the neighborhood to see, which is something that I have observed in many different neighborhoods where I live now and other cities where I live too. There's kind of this innate part of people that wants to perform in a way. And so if they're having problems, I've actually heard neighbors start fighting inside and move the fight outside as if they are entering a stage to perform it. And so I got this idea. I'd seen this happen all the time. It was fascinating to me that people would air so much of their dirty laundry in public. And so I started writing a play that would take place almost entirely on a front porch. And it revolves around a 14-year-old girl named Hattie, who is the princess. And her parents and friends, the adult figures in her life who are not very good role models, she's easily the most mature person in the play, and her feeling invisible and feeling lost in this world of dysfunction and wanting to escape that and wanting to get away to something more comfortable, more normal, quote unquote, without really knowing what that would be because she's grown up in a very dysfunctional situation.
And I think that's something that's so interesting about all of your plays is no matter what you're writing about, who the characters are, there are so many kernels of truth and threads of commonality in terms of you can watch your play or read your play and say, I know someone who's just like that character. Right. Or I know someone who would say that exact same thing to someone else if they were having that argument or if they were having that conversation. Yeah. And another play that you wrote that is very timely, I think even today, is Rough and Tumble, which is basically 5 political comedies. And I think you wrote those between 2002 and 2012, if I'm correct, around that time frame. And it kind of focuses on a divided nation and really parodies the politicians that really work hard to keep it that way. Right. And we think about our society today and where we are today in terms of our political culture and our divided political system. I think that is something that even when you started writing that, has so many kernels of truth for what's really going on today. Yeah,
there's one play in there, probably my favorite of those 5 plays. Well, there's a couple I really like. But one is it's about the filming of political campaign commercials. And so you see the Democrat first filming her commercial, and then the Republican, and then the Independent. And the Independent gets about 10 seconds of airtime compared to the minutes and minutes of airtime that the others get. And I try with those works to really poke fun at both sides of the political spectrum. And again, that divisiveness, but also the dysfunction that comes along with politics and the things that I think frustrate people about politics. There's another play called Little Donkeys and Elephants that I think has been performed more than anything I've written in the last couple years. A 7-year-old and an 8-year-old getting into a fight over, politics without really knowing what they're talking about because they're puppeting what they're hearing at home from their parents. But it's a funny little piece between the two of them. And it's fun. I've always been interested in politics, and that interest comes into my work a lot, but I also get frustrated with politics, and so that frustration comes out in my work too.
And it's great, and I would encourage anyone to read the Rough and Tumble or The Princess of Rome, Ohio, because there is so much, even today, of so many characters and cultural mores that are touched on in your plays that are so true today. Let me ask you about a series of plays that are probably my favorite, and I've seen some of these performed live, and I've enjoyed it so much, and that's the Bitsy and Boots series. Who's Bitsy? Who's Boots? And when you talk about dysfunction and funny things, these two characters have got it all the way. So tell us a little bit about Bitsy and Boots and what goes on in the series of plays that you've written about those characters.
They're the best. I love Bitsy and Boots. There's 5 Bitsy and Boots plays now. I don't know how I got to 5, but I just love these characters, so I keep coming back to them. But about 7 or 8 years ago, I had an idea for 2 characters named Bitsy and Boots, and I don't know where those names came from. They just came out of nowhere. And I wrote it down on a piece of paper, Bitsy and Boots, 2 older women, sisters, living together in southern Ohio, a bit eccentric. And that's all I wrote down on paper. And then I put it in a drawer for, at least a year. I didn't know what to do with it, but I could see these characters in my mind, and I thought there was something there. And so about a year after that, I got a call from Jane and Jerry Morse, who run the dinner theater here in town. They produce 1 play a year, First United Methodist Church dinner theater, and they asked if I wanted to write something for them. And they said, it can't have any swearing or alcohol or violence in it. And I didn't have any plays that didn't have any swearing or alcohol or violence. So I thought Bitsy and Boots might be an opportunity for me to write, a PG-rated play that would be more like something they would want to produce, but also I knew they would have the cast for it. Because I knew Jane, the woman who runs the dinner theater, and I thought, boy, she'd be a really good Bitsy. And so I got my Bitsy and Boots notes out and started from there, creating this story about these 2 women who lived in southern Ohio. They had raised their nephew, Tommy, who had since grown up and moved up north to a bigger city in Ohio. And he'd met a woman, they were engaged. He was bringing his fiance back home to meet his family for the first time. And so, of course, when they get back home to Chesapeake, Ohio, and meet, these 2 wildly eccentric and sometimes a bit, I don't know, off the wall or inappropriate aunts. He's afraid that they're going to run his fiance away back to Cincinnati. And so that was the first play. And then with the second play, I introduced Ida, who is a third character related to Bitsy and Boots, who's kind of a very negative or judgmental family member that I think everybody could relate to. In fact, somebody called Jane and Jerry once after one of those shows and asked how I knew their aunt whoever, who they just assumed Ida was based on. And it was somebody I'd never met, but it's like the kernels of truth you were talking about. There's something in each one of those characters that we can relate to and say, oh, well, that's my aunt so-and-so.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. That's great. And I love those characters because the way you've written them and the way you've described them, there are so many possibilities and situations and scenarios you can put all four of those characters in, Tommy and Bitsy and Boots and Ida, that, there's so many possibilities. Or do you see yourself writing any more plays for those four characters in the Bitsy and Boots series?
I think so. With each one, once I got to 4, I said, okay, this is probably it. I don't know what more I can do with these characters. And then I did a 5th one. And then I thought, well, that's probably the last one. 5 is an awful lot. But now, I'm starting to get ideas again for what a 6th Bitsy and Boots play might be. So I have a feeling there will be another one at some point, someday.
That's great. We're certainly looking forward to it and hope that happens. I wanted to ask you too, John, about the future of this genre, about the future of playwriting. We've had a lot of publishers on Chapters that have said a lot of various things about the state of the publishing industry and the changes that are going on with Amazon and the digital revolution and ebooks and all of this. Where do you see plays and playwriting as we go forward? And the reason I'm asking is because, we are such an instant society, and we're such a Facebook, Twitter, instant information, instant kind of gratification society, that writing a play, or the thought of going and sitting for an hour and a half or 2 hours to watch a 4-act play, in some ways seems, I don't want to say disconnected, but maybe old-fashioned from what we're used to today and how we get information and how we read and how we do things today. Do you see in the future still a place for theater, a place for playwriting, or do you feel like that's a medium that is going to undergo some changes, or has maybe already undergone some changes, just like regular book publishing has?
I think it has to some extent. I think that's already happened. You look at, theater has a lot going against it, because it is more of an old-fashioned entertainment, and because in many areas theater has priced itself out of the market. Most people can't afford to go see a play in New York. Most people that live in New York. A lot of people that live here can't afford to go pay $15 to $20 to see a play. But you can go to the movie theater on an afternoon and Saturday and spend $6 or $7, and most people prefer that type of entertainment. So I think we've already lost some degree of that. And I think you can get that back. I've done a lot with youth education outreach programs. When I worked at the Paramount Arts Center in Kentucky, we brought 50,000 kids a year to that theater to see a play, to give them that experience very early on in their life. I think I was much older than that when I saw my first play. And so I think there are ways that you can reverse that, but it's hard when we are in such an instantaneous society like you say. I don't know what the future of that is. What the future theaters are struggling everywhere because of that conflict.
I think what's interesting too, sort of on the flip side of that, or a continuation of that, is this area, the tri-state region, the West Virginia, Ohio, Kentucky region, has so many theater outlets and so many opportunities for people not only to see plays, but for people who want to get involved and maybe be an actor or try acting or try directing or costume design. There's so many avenues and opportunities. Why do you think this area has such a rich tradition of theater?
This area is amazing. We really do have, I'd say, double, maybe triple the theater companies operating as a lot of areas, much, much larger than us do. We have a lot going on for us theater-wise here, from community theater, children's theater, educational theater. There's a lot of opportunities for audiences and for artists to get involved. And I wouldn't be the playwright that I am if I didn't have that, because I've had at least 6 of these theater companies just in this tri-state area produce something that I wrote. And most playwrights don't have that kind of a resource that they can take their play to and get it performed. There's something about this area, and I don't know what it is, but we support our theater. In spite of all the odds against us, we have a lot going on at a number of different levels theater-wise, and there's a real love of theater among the people that are involved. There's a real love of theater. And if you can get other people into that, whether it's in the audience or whether it's on stage or backstage, they get hooked, they get bitten by the bug. And I think that's why we support really probably twice as many theaters as we should be able to, if you look, but we do it.
So let me ask you in our closing minutes here with you, John, what are you working on now? What is in the pipeline for the next play that we can expect to see produced from you?
I have a couple of projects. One, I teach a playwriting class to my students in Ashland, Kentucky, and we're writing plays together, short plays that will be showcased next semester within a new play festival of student-written work. And also we have a group, a community theater here in Huntington, Arts in Huntington, that performs at the old Huntington High School. And they are staging a new play festival in December of next year. And so I'll be writing something for them and hopefully be involved with that festival in other ways too. So those are two great opportunities just in this area, one in Ashland, one in Huntington, to get new work out there. In one case, it'll be more my students' work, but in the other, I'll be involved and be able to get something that I write on stage between now and then.
That's great. Well, we certainly look forward to that and wish you good luck.
Thank
you. Finally, if anyone wants to get in contact with you, John, about playwriting, to talk more about playwriting, or if people want to get a copy of your plays, how can they get in contact with you? Where can they get copies of your work?
I have, most of my work is on Amazon. And I have an Amazon author page. If you search Jonathan Joy or any of these titles that we've talked about, they'll take you to my Amazon author page. My email is joyjonathan, JONATHAN @Yahoo. So you can email me, go to my Amazon page, and find me that way.
Playwright Jonathan Joy, award-winning playwright Jonathan Joy, we appreciate you coming to Chapters today to talk about the genre of playwriting and drama and to talk a little bit about your work. And we wish you all the continued success in the future, and we look forward to seeing some of your plays here in the community in the very near future.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And finally, our episodes of Chapters each week are a conglomeration of a lot of people's efforts, both in front of the camera and behind the camera. And some of those folks are the staff and management here at Empire Books and News at Pullman Square here in downtown Huntington. They provide our studio taping space for each episode of Chapters. We encourage you to stop by and check out their books, magazines, periodicals, newspapers, and anything else that you like to read to satisfy your reading tastes. So come down and talk to Charlotte and her staff. Let them get you taken care of at Empire Books and News. They'll find what it is that you're looking for and get you on your way with some reading material that will help satisfy that itch that you may have to read. So come down to Empire Books and News anytime to check out their selection of books and the largest selection of periodicals and magazines in the tri-state as well. And if you've got a question, comment, or suggestion about this Chapters program or any other Chapters program you've seen here on Armstrong Cable, we want to hear from you. You can send us an email to the address that's right here at the bottom of the screen, lp4@zoominternet.net. That's the letter L, the letter P, the number 4 at zoominternet.net. We appreciate all the comments and feedback that we've received, so please keep those coming. And if you've watched a previous episode of Chapters or you want to go back and see a previous episode of Chapters that you've missed, we've made that available to you through the Armstrong One Wire YouTube page. You can simply go to www.youtube.com/Armstrong One Wire, all one word. Look for the Chapters tab, and there you can find over 11 hours of interviews with authors, publishers, editors, and writers, and talking about their work, talking about the process of writing. And we encourage you to do that. If there's an episode that you've missed or one you want to share with someone else, you can find that at the Armstrong One Wire YouTube page, and you can see the address there also at the bottom of your screen. And that's going to do it for us this time on Chapters, but please come again next time. And in the meantime, stay tuned to this station for news and views that impact you and your community.